Hello, this is Matthias for mamoworld.com, and in this tutorial I show you how to stabilize a shaky shot from a handheld camera. The great thing about the technique I show is that you don't need to zoom in into your clip. Such zooming is usually used to avoid unwanted borders of the image to become visible, but you know, you really don't want to do that kind of zooming since it costs you some resolution and also changes the framing of your shot. So let's see what we can do to avoid that. In step 1, we track the shot in Mocha. This works in exactly the same way as in my previous tutorials. The only thing that is a little bit different is that we adjust the tracking area during the shot, since no part of the scene stays in frame over the entire shot. In step 2, we do the actual stabilizing of the clip. In order to smooth the original camera movement, we apply a simple expression. But don't be scared, we don't have to write any complicated code, it's a very simple expression. In the third step, you will definitely see the most interesting part of the tutorial. We learn how to get rid of the black borders that occurred during the stabilization in step 2. And as said before, we do this without needing to zoom in. Instead, we use in each frame information from the frames before and from the frames after the current time to fill in the missing parts. This maybe sounds a little bit complicated, but you will see that it is actually very easy with my technique. Okay, so now let's start with the first part and tracking in Mocha. Okay, here we are now in Mocha where we want to track our shot. And the version I have open here is the brand new Mocha Pro that has many advanced features, and one of them is, for example, a stabilized module. You can see here, but actually we are just going to track it very simple and do all the stabilization in After Effects, so I can do all this with any version of Mocha you have, also with the one that comes with CS4 or with CS5. So I'm using here Mocha Pro, and you see the interface is a little bit different to other versions, but in general the tracking works in any other Mocha version also. So you can look other tutorials of mine to see the interfaces of the other versions, but yeah, it's really just the same thing. So we go to File, create a new project, and import our shaky shot. Click on Open here. And yeah, in older versions of Mocha, sometimes the frame rate was not recognized correctly. Here, everything works fine. I click on OK, and here I can see my shaky shot now. So what do you really need to track here? So it's always best to track the part of the video that you want to be stabilized most. So you can see here some foreground element. Yeah. That is also moving relative to the background, and the thing we really want to stabilize is rather this background plane here. So this area should be the thing that we more or less want to stabilize. We do not want the camera to precisely move later with this pole here, but rather with the background. So what we therefore do is we mark this background as something that we want to track with this Create X Spline tool. So we mark here just some portion of this background, right click to finish, and now we just need to tell Mocha what kind of movement do we want to track. And we do not want to track shear or perspective, since our stabilization will only make use of transform data, which is basically translation, scale, and rotation. So then we click here this track forwards button to track. Now you can see that Mocha is tracking, and the first problems occur when the track is going to leave the frame. So at any time we can also stop our tracking and just extend the area that we want to track. So just make it a little bit larger and continue tracking. So I again stop and make here the area that I want to track a little bit larger. Such that it always contains a good portion of what is currently in the frame. Okay, so the track is finished, and all that remains here is to go to Export Tracking Data, and then as a format we choose After Effects Transform Data. So no corner pin, but transform data, anchor point, position, scale, and rotation, and go to Save, and then we save it as, so let's call it Stabilize TF, since it's transform data. Save, and that's it. And so let's switch to After Effects. Okay, so here we are now in After Effects, and the first thing we are going to do is to take our footage here that I already have imported and drag it into a new composition. So here you can see our shaky footage, and what we want to do is stabilizing it. So we go to Window and open the MochaImport script that you have hopefully installed, and there we need first to load our tracking data. And we choose the stabilized TF file that we just created in Mocha, hit OK, and here also everything is fine. And what we then of course want to do is to stabilize the layer. Yeah, so we select this layer and want to stabilize the selected layer based on TF, so transform data. So make sure to export in Mocha transform data for this stabilize function. We select our layer and hit apply. And what we now have is actually a perfectly stabilized version of our footage. So as you can see here, the stuff we tracked, like this building here, is perfectly stabilized, and this is really not exactly yet what we want. Yeah, so we basically still want to have our old camera movement, but we want this camera movement to be smoothened. So what we actually want to do is move this shot. So in a second step, we just choose here transform data move, and again select our layer and again hit apply. So after applying the stabilize function, we also apply the move function. It seems to be a little bit strange, but let's do it. And what Mocha now did was create, or MochaImport was creating a null object such that our now perfectly stabilized shot again moves as it was before. So why is this helpful for you? Well, the point is, if you look at this null now, you can look at position, scale, and rotation, and have all these movement keyframes here. Yeah. So this means this is exactly the camera movement that you tracked, and now we are able to change it. So you could, for example, zoom in here and say, okay, for the position, I really do not want to have here every keyframe, but let's say we just want like one keyframe every 15 frames and delete everything in between. Yeah, so I'm going to delete this here, for example, and now you can see that you have your camera movement, but that this camera movement is a little bit stabilized. Yeah, you can see here these black borders showing up around your image. So your movement is smoother than your original movement was, because you basically take the original camera movement but take keyframes out of it. So all the small little details from one to the next one you want to ignore. And you could do this now for all the position and scale and rotation keyframes also, if you want to also stabilize the scale and the rotation. But I'm actually going to undo this here. And well, we can do much clever, because we can do this kind of stabilization with the help of expressions. So we alt-click on this stopwatch here and then get an expression. And don't be scared, you don't have to write any code. You just go here to this button that basically shows you all expression commands that are available. And there you choose property. And from the property, you use smooth. So this means take the existing keyframes, but smooth them. Yeah, hide or get rid of all the little wiggling in between. It's like the opposite of a wiggle, smooth. Yeah, And the smooth has 3 parameters: samples, time, and width. And samples and time are not so important for us, but with the width, it tells us how much do you really want to smooth. Yeah, 0.2 means an interval of 0.2 seconds should be smooth. And you can see that this yields to a little bit of stabilization, but not much. Yeah, there are just small black borders at the end. Or yeah, let's just RAM preview here this little part. Okay, like this. It's already less shaky than the original shot, but not so smooth. And we can increase the smoothness by setting this here, for example, from 0.2. So 0.2 means 0.2 to just 1, meaning an entire second. And if I play back this, you can see that it's already much smoother. So that's basically really it. So for MochaImport, first apply the stabilize function, then apply the move function, and then insert such a smooth expression for position if you want to stabilize a position. And you can also in the same way stabilize scale and rotation, but we are not going to do this now here. And the problem that remains, and you can see here, is these black borders that occur when you stabilize your image. And how to get rid of this, we are going to show you in the next step. Okay, I think the way you usually get rid of these black borders is the simple way that you just say, let's scale up my image. I will lose a little bit of resolution and it will look a little bit different. But anyway, it's the easiest and best thing I can do. So this would mean you take your composition, drag it into a new one that we call Shaky Shot Scaled. And then we can take our original shot, reveal its scale, and scale it just a little bit up. Yeah, and then you have a nicely stabilized version of your image, and no problems with it. Oh, here we can see we need to scale it up even further, like this. Okay, but the problem is, yeah, after stabilization, just a part of your image, so you really need to zoom in for that. So I want to show you a clever technique that allows you to get rid of this, and it's also, despite it's very powerful, it's not so complicated to apply. So I'm going to delete this scale thing again. And what we are actually going to do is, so let's go here to a frame that is really problematic. Think here at the end, like this is, for example, yeah, here heavy shaking is going on. And so what I want to do here is to say, okay, what about this part of the image that is missing? It's not in this frame, but it must be in other frames. Yeah, this is the basic idea here. It must be in frames before or afterwards. If it is so shaking so heavily, then this means, okay, in this frame, the information here is present that is missing here. And okay, it was 2 frames earlier, so it was a little bit ahead in time. But during this short period of time, not so much changed such that we can use really this information. Sounds maybe a little bit complicated, but it's really simple. So the idea is we take our footage, duplicate it, and the duplicate below we take and move it in time and see what is happening. This is really great, right? You just choose another point in time where the frame was located or where the camera was pointing somewhere else and get by that an extension of your image. Yeah, so this was the original stabilized shot. This is the new version that extends this. And now we can go here over and say, here this doesn't seem to be good enough. Yeah, here this extension already helped me, but it was not yet perfect. So I duplicate this layer a second time, and this duplicate I move here even further. So let's add another duplicate and still move it further like this. So you can see that what we get here are really then a number of copies of our original shot that basically all act on different time points. Yeah. So like here, the first one, This one is our current frame, and here we have stuff that comes from these other layers that represent information from other points in time. And what you can do by that now is, well, go over the entire footage here and see where you need what. So, for example, at this point, it seems like none of these could really help us extending. So I again make another duplicate here and move it maybe in this direction. You can see here it turns out to be better to look a little bit ahead in time, not to look at, or in other words, here you're looking at earlier frames and here you're looking at later frames. So this extends our image. In this case, very nice. Yeah, like this. And you can see that now already a very large part of what was before black is now nicely compensated. Yeah. And I'm not going to go this, I mean, you can do this many times, and you can also add as many duplicates here as you like. You could in principle also do it very, let's say, in a regular way, that you say, okay, I take my footage, duplicate it, move it one frame to the right, duplicate it again, move it another frame to the right, duplicate it again, another frame to the right. This is basically the most accurate you could do. And then you can do the same also. So this means if something is not present at the current time, let's first look one frame afterwards, and then let's look one frame afterwards. And if there is still no information present, let's look at the next frame, and so on and so on. So by that, you really start extending your shot in the one direction, and then you can also start extending it in the other direction. So I duplicate it and move it here to the left now. Yeah. And move it again to the left, duplicate, move it again one frame to the left, and so on. So you have many duplicates of your layer that you can see here that all together give the best possible picture. So everything that is present in the current frame is taken from the current frame. If not, it's tried to be taken from this frame. Everything is not covered here, is taken from this layer, and so on. And yeah, by that you get a pretty good coverage of your image. And so this means you don't really need to zoom in after your stabilization to get rid of the black parts. And to avoid then, I mean, there might be that some parts, like here, these corners, you can see, let's deactivate all the layers except our original one, yeah. So you can see this was our original frame after stabilization. This is extended after we added all these other time points, and this is something that we have actually no information for. You see, this is really missing in all those time points. So what to do with it? One idea is, okay, we can still use the scaling idea, still can scale in addition to this extension. Or the other thing is, and this is what I'm going to do now here, is to say, okay, I just put an unstabilized version at the very bottom. So something that is not covered by any earlier or later time point is extended by the original image. And you can see that this nicely fills in here, this part. Actually, this is also a shot that is very difficult to stabilize. Yeah. You can see there's a lot of motion going on. Nothing is really staying in the frame all the time. There's motion blur, foreground elements, background elements, all this complicated stuff. So I didn't really pick an example that shows you that everything is great and hides all the ugly details, but it's a very robust method that works always. I also don't want to hide the fact that there are some artifacts possible. So for example, if you look here, you can see that what was filled in by these other time points for this pole here was not really perfect. Yeah, so let's deactivate here everything except the first one. So this was the original image, and what was filled in here, is not really precise. And this is because this pole here in the foreground is so much different in movement than this background here. And if you have, for example, a guy walking through your shot or something like this, you could also have similar artifacts here. But in general, it's a really simple method, and I hope that you find it useful and that the artifacts you get will be really rare. Okay, so one last side note, and this is if you're doing a lot of this stabilization stuff, you can really also think about using the stabilization module of Mocha Pro. So this has also these functionalities that it reconstructs parts of the image from other time points. So basically the ideas that I just showed you here, but it's working a little bit more conveniently, so you don't really need to choose from which frames or from which time points the things should be reconstructed, but this there happens automatically. So you can do it the way I did it here, or you can use the little bit more convenient functions of Mocha Pro, but for Mocha Pro stabilization there are other tutorials, so I don't cover it here. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. This is Matthias for mamoworld.com.